I find it sadly ironic that last week we celebrated Pentecost and asked for the Spirit to breathe on us. Within days, the newspapers are covering a very different story of someone called George Floyd, whose last words were, "I cannot breathe." I'd already prepared a video diary for this week. It was about signs, about looking at where the Spirit's leading. And I had to listen to the Spirit's prompting and my own words, because the Spirit led me to do something completely different. And it was far more appropriate that we have a focus on the events of this past week and those words, "I cannot breathe." You might be thinking, what's that got to do with me, 4,000 miles across the other side of the world? What's it got to do with me and my church that is predominantly white and middle class? May I be as bold as to say it has everything to do with you and me, because this is a kingdom issue. This diary is as much as a testimony as anything else. My first encounter with racism was when I went out preaching from college, and I recall arriving at this church, and as I entered the church there was a strange sense of something was up. And the church secretary welcomed me and said these words. She said, "Nigel?" And I said, "Yes." She said, "Oh, that's all right. We thought we were going to have an Indian and we wouldn't be able to understand him." I asked why. They said they saw my surname and thought it was unusual, Manges, and the only thing they could relate it to was Ganges, Indian. But I must confess, I've never known an Indian called Nigel. Before moving down to the southwest, I was the senior minister of probably the largest multicultural Baptist church in the north of England. In my last 5 years we had of ministry at that church, we had 46 different nationalities through the door. Within a square mile of the church there were 60 different languages. Within our church we had interpreters available in 11 languages, including Russian, Chinese, Farsi and Burmese. And I want to tell you that in all the people that came through our doors, from every different ethnic culture, every background, they had a story to tell about racial abuse and racial injustice that they personally had experienced. For many, the safe place was church on a Sunday. These are our brothers and sisters in Christ, and they represent a wider community who do not have that safe space. And their cry rings out, "I cannot breathe," and it doesn't seem to be getting any better. I can tell you the story of No, who was kept in a police cell and told he was going to be deported and held in that cell for 8 hours in a British cell without any food or water. I could tell you of the Indian student who was looking for accommodation for her second year at university. She went for a viewing and the landlord took one look at her and told her that the room had been let. A friend of hers, who was white, followed 10 minutes later, was shown around the room and offered it. I could tell you of the people who arrived at the church, and when I asked the question, "Why have you come to us?" they would reply they tried another fellowship but were told that they were more suited at our church because that's where all the coloureds go. Or I could tell you about the family that was housed in a very difficult 99.9% white council estate, and within a week had painted on their doors, "Go home foreigners or we will rape your daughter." There are many, many stories like that about injustice and abuse. Why did they receive this injustice and abuse? Simply because they had a different coloured skin. On many occasions I've cried with them and felt so embarrassed, angry and helpless. I know that many struggle to understand how they feel, why they feel as they do. May I illustrate why? If I hold this up, what do you see? I can't see that because that's not on my side. I will never see what you see unless I take time to go around the tin. We have a kingdom issue at the moment and we need to take time to walk around the issue to actually see what others see. That actually requires more than sympathy. It means we have to take the hard road of empathy. That's a costly road because we are not simply looking in but walking with them, for we are called to mourn with those who mourn. Remember that speech, "I have a dream," so said Martin Luther King, as he shared a vision for a new society. In his mind's eye it was clear, a picture of what could be, and that dream, that vision that spurred him on to a journey that sadly has still not found its destination in his country or in ours or in the world. Within our scriptures we have the prophets of God who spoke into their current situation, and we need to listen to the prophets who speak into our context as Martin Luther King did. We need to hear that we are all loved by Jesus, that as Galatians 3:28 says, there is neither Jew nor Gentile, neither slave nor free, neither there is male or female. We are all one in Christ. And as Genesis reminds us that we are all, underlined, all created in God's image. We are called into treating and welcoming people in the way that Jesus did. It's more than a simple welcome that we're called. We're called to stand with them in the injustice of the world in which they are trying to live. The Old Testament stories are actually foundational in the tradition of hospitality and care for others. The Old Testament laws address the entire community and establish structural supports to protect aliens in poverty and of abuse. For example, the judges were to deal impartially between the alien and the Israelites. You can find that in Deuteronomy 1 and 24. The Israelites were later to see themselves as strangers and not to forget how it felt to be the stranger in their wilderness years. The Hebrew people came to this pilgrim existence for themselves and grew unusually sensitive to the needs of aliens and strangers who later resided within their borders. In the New Testament, the cultural tradition was a sacred bond between host and guest. It was seen as one of the pillars of morality. It was more than giving a bed for the night, it was allowing them to be a part of the family and to care for them. Coming back to today, we need to ask the question, what is God saying? Through the anguish and the anger and the desperation of the people we see on the TV screens, and for those that we know. And what do we do? I believe the answer to one of the questions of what we do is that we listen, and we listen intently to the voices unlike our own. We learn from the experiences of others, and we create a safe space of warmth and hospitality to pray and get alongside them and walk with them in their injustice. Not with the purpose to agree or disagree, but to see and hear as they see and hear. Our brothers and sisters from all ethnic backgrounds are weary and tired and require the support and help from us. For you and me, especially those leading the communities, we're called at this time to mourn with those who mourn and to stand alongside those who have the inability to breathe, so that together we can remake the image of Christ. And as we step out, it does mean more than sympathy, feeling for another. It demands empathy where we feel with another. And so we listen, we learn, and we welcome and stand alongside and speak up for injustice. We deal with racism in and outside of the church so that they can breathe, and may the breath of God move amongst us. To close, I just want to share with you Hebrews 2:10. Do not forget to welcome the stranger, for by doing so people have entertained angels without knowing it. In my experience, this has proven to be an amazing reality. May God bless you.